Good morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and I want to invite you to episode 22 of our podcast entitled Caring in America. And as I do on each episode, a little background about who I am and why I'm doing this. So roll the clock back about 18 years. I'm minding my own business in the software industry. My wife and I got married later. We had two small children at that point, one 11 and one 7. And all of a sudden in the summer of '05, we start getting phone calls. Those phone calls turned out to be 4 of them from our 4 parents. And quite an adventure started as we started taking care of each one of them. We were completely unprepared. It lasted for 14 years until the last parent passed away in 2019. It led to our company Points of Life being able to reach out and educate folks around the country about this small letter word called care. And we started this podcast to reach out to more. So, with that, we're going to have a guest on our podcast episode this morning. I want to start by introducing her. Sue Peschin is the president and CEO of the Alliance for Aging Research, a nonprofit organization leading the way to a healthier, more dignified aging experience for all. The Alliance vision is to create a culture that respects aging as a greater good and values investments that advance independence, dignity, and equity. Ms. Peschin has led efforts to increase federal investments in aging research. She has a BA in sociology from Brandeis University and a master's of health science in health policy from Johns Hopkins University, their Bloomberg School of Public Health. And if I have my numbers correct, she's been with the Alliance for approximately 12 years and about 25 years in the nonprofit world. Are you there, Sue?
I'm here, Richard, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So I believe you're in Rockville, Maryland. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So how's your weather back there this morning, ma'am?
It's beautiful. It's nice and sunny and warm today, and we're enjoying it.
Very,
How about you?
very nice. We're outside of Boise, Idaho. It's been warm. We're probably going to be pushing about 90 degrees today and probably stay there for the next few days to week and then kind of see where things go as we slowly move towards October and obviously fall and winter. But what I would like to do is start by having you give us some more information about the Alliance and what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. So, the Alliance for Aging Research was started in 1986, and we started because in the mid 80s at the time, there were no groups that were working on aging research as a way to enhance the aging process and overall health. There was a lot of focus on direct senior services programs and on looking at the entitlement programs and making sure that those were sustainable over time, but not really the National Institutes of Health. And there had been a National Institute on Aging started in the 1970s. So there was a focus on lifting the profile of that institute, doubling of the NIH budget, which happened in the 90s. and working on issues like stem cell research, which was really sort of cutting edge for the biology of aging and the aging process itself. And since that time, we've expanded to working on, we continue to work on NIH funding every year, but we work on a lot of other public policy issues, as well as a whole area of health education for clinicians, for individuals as they age, and for, the public and press. So we work on a whole variety of issues, a lot in access in the Medicare program. We touch on Medicaid occasionally. And then issues that are going on at the Food and Drug Administration. And we were very active throughout COVID and still are. The new COVID vaccines for the fall were just approved by the FDA yesterday, and CDC is going to be making their recommendations on those today. And so we have a whole variety of materials and things that we work on, and folks can visit us at agingresearch.org.
That's fantastic. So, in kind of a nutshell, if our audience can be of any age, and obviously, when we talk about care, that normally affects the aging individual, and that also affects the people in their family, whether it be a daughter, a son, etc., and potentially other siblings. Is there a way, in a nutshell, you could kind of talk about what you guys are doing? And I heard the broad approach, which I very much like, heard what you guys are doing to really address what may be in coming for that adult child daughter as her mother or father or grandparent ages, or for that aging individual themselves, if that question makes sense.
Absolutely. We have a whole variety of resources for folks. A lot of what we focus on are diseases and conditions that disproportionately impact people as they age. So issues around Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular issues, vision loss. And we have a wide variety of materials that folks can look to, and including some issues that not a lot of the disease specific groups might talk about as much. Like, for example, in Alzheimer's disease, we have a number of materials on neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia, like when people experience agitation or aggression or psychosis, which are very common with Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementias, but we tend to talk more about memory loss or functional loss. And the behavioral issues and emotional issues can sometimes be, as or more challenging for family caregivers and for the individuals experiencing them. So we've developed a few videos that feature people who live with the disease, people who care for people, clinicians. Those are called expert conversations, and they're available. We also have a couple of other videos that give an overview called Shake the Stigma. So we have those types of things. And then we advocate on a regular basis for funding at the NIH, for access to new types of treatments in the Medicare program at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So there's a lot for folks to explore and come to us for. And then we also have, our own personal experiences. So we're not speaking on necessarily on behalf of the Alliance just from our own experience, but I think sometimes it can be helpful for those of us who have a platform to speak to what are often very common experiences for a lot of different families, and just offer our advice and what we know is helpful.
No, and I very much appreciate that, and I think you may agree with this, you may not, but we talk a lot on this podcast about this four-letter word that people hate called plan, and understanding that as we age, stuff happens, and that stuff can be little stuff, it can be big stuff, it can be physical, it can be emotional and mental, like you're talking about. We have not addressed the issue, and we're going to, and upcoming episodes, this whole issue of dementia, this whole issue of Alzheimer's. I love what you're doing. I would really encourage people from a plan perspective, and I'm going to get your expert opinion in a second, but to really start understanding, as Sue just talked about, what is out there from a dementia perspective and an Alzheimer's perspective, in that, as she said, it's not just memory loss. It can be, we had a neighbor that was aging and quite aggressive from a dementia perspective. What advice would you have for the adult children? What should they be looking for or listening to get an idea of maybe mom's changing or something's going on with dad or their grandparents?
Of course. And there are a number of different resources at the local level, from Alzheimer's Association chapters to area agencies on aging, that folks can go to learn about what's available in terms of resources. But in terms of looking for changes, there's changes that we all experience as we get older, with forgetting where we put our car keys. But it's when we forget about what the car keys are for, or where they're supposed to go in a car, that it can become concerning. Oftentimes, some of the first symptoms that can be a cause for concern are financial management concerns. So if you were able to manage your checkbook and your finances for a very long time, and then you reach a point where that's not manageable to you, that can be a sign to be able to go to your clinician and ask those questions. Any of these types of experiences, including neuropsychiatric symptoms, if you were never generally an agitated person, but you start experiencing that, or a lot of anxiety or depression, those are all things that can place you at a higher risk and are worth talking to your doctor about. The annual medical wellness visit, Medicare wellness visit, which is an annual benefit that's provided. It's not a physical, it's a wellness visit, but it includes a check on your cognition and a small, screening test that clinicians can give, that are easy to do. It doesn't even have to be the doctor in the doctor's office. Sometimes they allow, a nurse or a physician's assistant to perform the testing. And that can be really helpful to know whether you might need further evaluation. But it's a real easy way to explore whether there's something that may be of concern or not. There's also a lot of other issues that can cause cognitive problems that aren't dementia, right? If you're having issues with mixed medications, or if you have a thyroid problem or a problem, depression can cause cognitive issues. Low vitamin B can cause cognitive issues occasionally. So it's really important, first and foremost, just to approach, your doctor, ask the questions, start the dialogue, and get checked out.
I was thinking as you were talking, excellent information. You used a word a little while ago called stigma. And I think whether that's the older individual, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or that adult child, a lot of times there is a stigma attached to dementia and to Alzheimer's. But I also like what you just talked about at the end of your little talk there, in that maybe it isn't dementia, maybe it isn't Alzheimer's, maybe there are other things medically or through medication that are going on. Because I hope that folks that are listening, especially the older individual, as you were talking about, take that wellness appointment. Go get checked out. Maybe you're starting to see some things happening to you, but as Sue was talking about, maybe it's coming from a different direction. And the same thing with the adult children. We see a lot, and I'm sure you've seen this too in the elder care world, that the next few months are usually this when this industry gets really busy as the adult children go home for Thanksgiving, the adult children go home for Christmas, and they start seeing differences in mom or dad or a grandparent. But I like what you're talking about and the fact that, because unfortunately, I think, and again, correct me if you think I'm wrong, that a lot of older individuals, maybe stigma, maybe fear, will not go to the doctor and get themselves checked out. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I do think that that is definitely a factor, especially in certain, communities and in certain cultures where people see dementia or Alzheimer's disease as losing your mind. And it can be very scary to think about having that as a chronic condition. But the good news is that there is more and more research that is happening. There are management strategies that are available. There's a lot more awareness and care that is currently available. And like I said, we are, sort of working to address the stigma that is out there so that communities are much more friendly to recognizing that our population is aging. There are more and more people that have Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, and you can still have a very, high quality life for quite some time, where you can operate in your community. And communities just need to be able to adjust and embrace and learn about the condition, just like we've learned about cancer and heart disease and other types of conditions that people experience. This does not take a lot to learn about, and to just be kind and welcoming and friendly and be able to regard people as people.
And again, that's fantastic information. I really credit you for the work you guys are doing at the Alliance. You mentioned a word a few minutes ago, and we have talked offline, and that word was personal. And I believe some things have happened within your own life. Would you be willing to share those stories?
Sure. So we are at a place where you were, Richard, a number of years ago, where both my mom and my husband's mom are in their 80s. And my mom came here to the Rockville area from Pittsburgh, where I grew up, after my stepdad was in a car accident. And my mom had arthritis, pretty severe arthritis for a good portion of her life. So she had some mobility issues and needed to move here, but it was right in the middle of COVID. And she had COVID. We did not know that when we brought her here. And we all ended up getting it. But of course, she was older and she got it more severely and needed to be hospitalized. And it was right when some of the medications were becoming available at the end of 2020. And very luckily, we got her to the hospital in time. And, she was able to survive it and go through a lot of rehab to get better, which a lot of older adults had to do. And we know from, research that is gradually coming out that having severe bouts with COVID can put you at higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And my mom has now had it twice, actually. She was hospitalized a second time with hypertension issues. She had a hypertensive crisis and had to go to a rehab. And it was when there was another wave coming through. And she survived that as well, was able to get an antiviral, but is now exhibiting signs of Alzheimer's, and we're in the process of getting worked up and doing all of that. But there's a lot of short term memory loss, a lot of repetitive questions on a regular basis. We've checked her out for other things. And that's the other thing. It's important when you get a workup, you don't just get a cognitive screen or neuropsychological testing, excuse me, but you ask for a urinalysis, you ask for blood work to be done to make sure that it's not a UTI that's causing confusion or memory loss or other types of infections or other issues that could be going on. In my mom's case, we need to go a little bit further, and it's probably something cognitive. And then on the other side of things, my husband's mom was diagnosed late with late stage lung cancer, and so she is in home hospice now. So we're really dealing very head on with the healthcare system, with home care, with sort of longer term care issues, and with end of life care issues. And I can't emphasize enough my support for what you said about planning. It's so important because when you're in a tough spot, you don't want to have to deal when it's high stress and very high emotions with what our choice is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for sharing that. I know how difficult that probably is. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned COVID and then cognitive issues, what the correlation is there?
Yeah, I don't, I think that they're just at the beginning of understanding it, but it seems to be that for folks who have had Alzheimer's or dementia and experience COVID, that it can accelerate the dementia in those individuals. And then for some people who did not have Alzheimer's or dementia prior to COVID, but then experience severe bout with COVID, if they are on the older side, they are seeing patterns of people, being at higher risk of developing it. And again, these patterns are just because we are still going through. We may all be done with COVID, but COVID's not quite done with us. So this research is just coming out, and we're just starting to learn more about it. But I think everybody knows that it has, vascular components to it. There are people who have needed to, take, blood thinners from clots in their lungs or this or that. And all of these things, can be connected to what can occur in the brain. There's also the complication of long COVID, which can cause a cloudiness, a fogginess in the brain. And so parsing out, are folks experiencing what is known as long COVID, and to the extent that we know about long COVID, and what is the difference between that and an Alzheimer's or another dementia. So that research is ongoing.
One of the things I like that we're talking about, and I hope the listeners pick up on, it was similar in my life. It sounds like it's similar in your life. As we age, as things may or may not happen from a cognitive perspective, if, and a lot of people don't have kids, but if you have adult children, that adult children, as we did with our four parents and you're doing, have to be that guide, have to be that individual. And that's why I really harp on this a lot, to really understand what this journey is like from a fall or a diagnosis, and where that older individual may be going from care, and where's it going to be and what's it going to cost, and the effect on the adult child or the adult children in their life. And really understanding, as Sue has been talking about, kind of this roadmap. For instance, if it's a long journey for a loved one, or maybe it's unfortunately a shorter journey, and we're talking about hospice, something we haven't talked a lot about, but we're going to, and really understand how that works, where hospice is available, and it's available pretty much all over the country, and how that really works for the family. So Sue, with from your fantastic education, what you're doing with the Alliance, what you're going through personally, I mean, what have you learned from all this journey?
One thing I would say is that it's really important to have someone with you if it's at all possible. And I know not everyone is as fortunate, but if you have a parent who is going through health issues, or a spouse, or a brother or sister, or a neighbor or a good friend, and they need someone with them at medical appointments, it makes such a difference to have someone there to help write things down, to remember what was said, to help formulate questions, and to help advocate. Because there is such a push right now, I think, as our population gets older, to try to conserve costs. And I'm not trying to advocate that everyone should have intervention for everything possible, but it's important to not be dismissed in the clinical setting. And that if something is just written off, for example, I'll give you an example with my mom. She got a cognitive test. And it was just a screening test. She didn't do so well on it. And we immediately got a referral to a neurologist. And I work full time, and this was somebody who helps out during the day who had taken her. And I said, "Well, did they take any blood or get a urine sample?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, that needs to be done in the primary care setting. We need to go back." So I went back with my mom the second time and needed to push for it. They just wanted us to go straight to the neurologist and have neuropsychological testing. And I said, there are other things that can come up, and she could have an infection and this and that. So understanding, what should be done is not always done, and having someone there with you that can help speak up and ask questions, and have that dialogue with the clinician to learn what things mean and why things are being suggested or not, is really, really critical. So that to me is the number one thing of any and all, is if you can have someone with you, definitely bring someone.
Yeah, I really appreciate that advice and expanding on what I was talking about. We know so many adult children live elsewhere in the country, elsewhere in the world, not near mom, dad, grandparents, etc. But that neighbor, that friend, someone that can go with your loved one for the exact reason that Sue was talking about. Yeah, and you don't wanna be out of line and really pushing and be rude, but hopefully if you've done some research and understand what to some degree at what you're looking at, with Sue's knowledge, she understood that, but saying to a physician or a nurse, "Shouldn't we be doing X, Y, or Z?" Having that advocate, folks, is so important, especially if you're talking about someone that has aged, is aging, and cognitive issues may be there. I very much appreciate all we've been talking about, Sue, as we get ready to wrap this up. And I know you've given a website before, but if people want to get in connection with the Alliance, can you repeat a website? Is there a phone number that people should have, etc.?
Absolutely, Richard. And thanks again. Our website is agingresearch.org. You can also email us at info, at agingresearch.org. And if you send us an email, we monitor that and we'll happily respond.
This has been great, Sue. I very much appreciate all the information that you've been giving folks. This whole area, and again, I compliment you for what you guys are doing at the Alliance, talking about the connection between COVID and cognitive issues. There's so many other issues we can be talking about. And as we get ready to wrap up, folks, if you're an expert out there like Sue and want to talk to folks out in the public via this podcast, please reach out to me. I'm about to give you an email. If you're also someone like Sue, maybe you're an expert, maybe you're not an expert in the elder care arena, but you have a story or stories that you would like to talk about on the podcast, please reach out to me again. That email, folks, do you have a pen? Is eldered2023 at gmail.com. ELDERED2023 at gmail.com. Once again, Sue, I want to thank you. And as we do when we sign off each time, folks, until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day.